This is the 175th Koine Corner. Imagine that, 175 of these things. Today we're taking a look at some cutting comments that Jesus made in John chapter 7. So in John chapter 7, Jesus is sparring with religious leaders over their assessment of him. So let's dive in with chapter 7, verse 22 from the ESV, and then we're going to look at the last part of the verse in Koine. Moses gave you circumcision, not that it is from Moses, but from the fathers. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. So it's that last phrase that we're looking at. Kai en Sabbato peritemnete anthropon. So Kai en Sabbato, and in the Sabbath. Now the ESV says on the Sabbath. So let's have a little fun with prepositions. The preposition en is in, and that's how it was written, because the Sabbath is from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday. It is a period of time. So when he says, and in the Sabbath, he's talking about within that period of time, where in English, we would expect not en, but epi, upon or on the Sabbath. Like we're looking at a calendar and we're saying, well, on Saturday or on Wednesday, we're going to do this. So the difference is our English understanding. We think of it in terms of being on a day, whereas when Jesus makes the statement, he's talking about being within the hours that make up the Sabbath, from sunset Friday to sunset Saturday. So what is it that we're told happens on the Sabbath? And kai en sabbato, and in the Sabbath, peritemnete, you circumcise anthropon, a man. So circumcision is commanded to be done on the 8th day of a Jewish boy's life, in conjunction with giving his official name, announcing his official name. And this is a component, one of the stipulations of the covenant between God and Abraham. So the interesting thing is you have two commandments, two stipulations of the covenant that seem to be in conflict. The Sabbath commandment says don't do any work on that day, but the command to circumcise on the 8th day doesn't exactly supersede it, but they will circumcise the baby. If the 8th day falls on the Sabbath, they will go ahead and circumcise the baby on that day. And we have our verb here, peritemnete, and peri, around, temnete, cut, and the noun is peritome. Both, and even the English that we get from the Latin, circumcise, means to cut around. So everybody knows what we're talking about, right? It's removing foreskin from the penis of this 8-day-old baby. And look at the last thing that he says. He says, you circumcise anthropon, a man. We're talking about 8-day-old baby boys, but he refers to him as a man. Why? Because this rite is what makes a child ben berith in Hebrew, a son of the covenant. This baby is going to be a man of Israel, is going to be a Jewish man based on being incorporated into the covenant through this rite. The cutting makes it so. So hold on to that thought and let's go on to verse 23. If on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? So Jesus pushes back against their perceptions. They're very concerned about law keeping, and they're willing to overlook the Sabbath's prohibition against work in order to fulfill the circumcision commandment and make sure that they cut that little piece of flesh off on the 8th day rather than the 7th or the 9th. So he says, here you are angry with me because, the ESV says, because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well. And we have to talk about that. Let's look at this in a little more depth. peritomen lambane anthropos en sabato hina me luthe honomos mouseos. So peritomen, if circumcision, lambane, he receives anthropos, a man. So if a man receives circumcision en sabato, in the Sabbath, during the Sabbath hours, so if a man is circumcised during the Sabbath hours, hina, in order that me luthe honomos mouseos, the law of Moses should not be broken. So he's saying, you accept the notion that it's okay to circumcise during the Sabbath hours in order that the law of Moses should not be broken. So in a sense, you're going to break one law of Moses. You're going to work on the Sabbath. You're going to do this act on the Sabbath so that the circumcision commandment should not be broken. Then we get to this interesting twist that he says to them. Emoi kolate hoti holon anthropon hugie apoiesa and sabato. So emoi, to me, or with me, kolate, you are angry, but it's literally you are galled. It's like you're choking up bitter bile in your mouth with me. That you're like it's related to your guts. Kolate is related to your guts. So like you are bringing up gall and bile in your mouths with me. Why? He says, because I made the whole man well in the Sabbath, during the Sabbath hours. Made the whole man well. They're perfectly okay with cutting off a little piece of flesh to satisfy one commandment, seemingly in violation of another. But they're bitter with him because what did he do? He made the whole person well. And it's interesting that the ESV says, I made a man's whole body well, but the word body doesn't appear in the verse here. So body is soma, and soma does not appear here. What Jesus says to them is, I made the whole man well, the whole person well. You're okay with cutting off bits and pieces, but you're upset with me for making the whole person well. It's kind of a pun, isn't it? It's kind of a play on words. It's kind of a conceptual jibe at them. Here you are, okay with cutting off bits, but your mouth is full of gall and bile with me because I'm making the whole person well. Pretty amazing stuff. Now we get the coup de grace. Let's go to verse 24. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. So let's look at that whole verse. Me krinete kat opsen ala tein dikaean krisen krinete. So me krinete, judge not, do not judge. It's an imperative with a negative in front of it. Kat opsen, according to faces, according to surfaces, according to the outward appearance, according to what you can see. Allah, rather, instead, tein dikaean krisen, just judgment, according to just judgment or righteous judgment, krinete, judge, another imperative. So I like the last two words, krisen, krinete. We get the two different kinds of judgment. Krinete is the process of judgment, and krisen, from krisis, is the outcome or the verdict of judgment. So he's saying, make sure that your judgment that you arrive at through your process of judging is just and isn't just based on superficial surface appearances, what you can see with your eye. So think about what we're talking about here. What you can see with your eye is whether or not a man has been circumcised. What you can't see is whether the whole person has been made healthy or well, right? At a bris, at the ceremony on the 8th day of circumcising these Jewish babies, at a point in the ceremony when the mohel uncovers the baby to do the actual rite of circumcision, the women and girls are asked, depending on the degree of orthodoxy, to either turn away or to leave the room. The men and boys are not, for modesty's sake, don't have to turn away. They can observe the cut. So think about what Jesus said to them. Instead of making your judgments based on what you can see, on the superficial nature of a cut of the flesh, you should engage in righteous or just judgment and look at the wholeness of the situation. Jesus makes the whole person well, whereas circumcision just takes off a bit of the flesh in a ceremonial sense. You don't know what that person's going to grow up to be. You don't know what the well-being of that person is going to ultimately be. The only thing you know is the superficiality that a cut of the flesh has happened. But here you are with a mouthful of gall, a mouthful of bile, because Jesus, in the Sabbath hours, is making the whole person well. Righteous judgment looks beyond the superficial cut of the flesh and looks to see the status of the whole person and is better suited to understand what has happened en sabbato, in the Sabbath hours, versus just that little superficial cut based on appearances, the whole person being made well. Great stuff, interesting stuff. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, share it on social media, hit the notification dinger so you know when there's new content, and let me know what you think in the comments. And until next time, Charis Kairene Humene, grace and peace to you.